Hello there and welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey into men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now, if like me, you come to a point in your life where you feel the time is right to make an investment in a luxury watch, there are a lot of things to think about. You may have decided that it's time to mark a significant birthday, or perhaps you've retired, or you just come into some money and you want to invest in a little piece of luxury. Well, there are lots of things to think about, particularly if you want to walk down the road of buying a Rolex watch. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So this video is all about buying your first Rolex, and I'm going to make the assumption that it's going to be your first luxury watch as well. May not be the case, but many of the points that we raise are going to be relevant. So you've got a few dilemmas to overcome here because, you know, it's an important thing. It's a considered investment, it's a lot of money. You want to make sure you make the right decision. Now, whilst there are numerous good brands out there, you know, why would you choose Rolex? And it's important really to make a decision about what route you want to take, because, you know, whilst you may be drawn to Rolex because of their excellent advertising and marketing, it's really important to know that there are other brands out there that might suit you just as well. They might even produce better watches, but they will cost less money. Rolex is quite expensive for the model or the product that they produce. So, you know, have a look around. Look at things like Omega, IWC, Tudor. They all make, you know, comparative level wristwatches in many respects. They've all got a different nuance to them. But if, like me, you had an overwhelming desire to place the Rolex crown upon your wrist, there's a few things you need to know that should influence your thinking. Now, I purchased my first Rolex only 3 years ago, and I went through a number of the stages I'm going to talk about today. So hopefully, by offering some of these tips to you, if you're on a first Rolex journey, it might help you considerably, shortcutting, making sure that you get the right watch on your wrist. Now, if you're not already aware of it, you will encounter the Rolex Phenomenon when you're aiming to own one of these watches. And I think the best way I can describe it is you're about to embark on a journey to buy a Rolex watch, which will be unlike any other customer experience that you've probably encountered, unless you're in the habit of buying limited edition Ferraris or something like that. And it's because Rolex very carefully control the amount of their stock, the number of watches which they manufacture, or certainly that they release to the public every year. And it's kept at a state where there are certainly more people who want certain Rolex watches than can get their hands on it. And that causes this supply and demand situation where there are people who are, you know, ferociously attempting and wanting to buy watches, but they can't get hold of them. And it really has an unusual situation. Why do Rolex do that? Nobody really knows. I mean, the whole Rolex situation itself is somewhat unusual. It exists in a strange charity status in its home country of Switzerland, where because of its charitable status, it doesn't really need to make certain information public every year. So nobody actually knows how many watches they make. Nobody truly understands how much profit they make, because, you know, Switzerland, which has particularly secretive business reporting systems anyway, you add a charitable status to that, and there is certainly an enigma about Rolex, which actually feeds this phenomenon quite a lot. And, you know, you get this frenzy of people who want to own the watches, can't find them, and then you're about to enter all that to make a Rolex your next purchase. Now, the first thing you need to consider is your budget, because this is really going to determine where you enter the market with these wonderful world of Rolex pieces. And you will be struck by the cost of these items. I know I was. I got to a point where I thought, it's time to make a purchase. I had an idea how much a luxury watch would cost. I went to my local Rolex Authorized dealer and I was surprised, you know, to find that Rolex watches cost probably twice as much as an Omega, certainly twice as much as a Tudor and more for a similar level of engineering and a similar overall product. So you need to get your head around the fact that it's quite expensive. However, you can counterbalance that by the fact that they are a relatively solid investment as well. So if you buy a Rolex watch, you've got a pretty good understanding that you can realize that similar amount of money, and in some cases a little bit more, if you sell that watch on. We'll talk about that in a moment, but it's a good investment. But it's worth remembering, as I said, there are more watches out there which can offer a better price proposition. So entering into Rolex, I want you to do so with your eyes wide open as to the value proposition. And it's really worth remembering, you should never buy a Rolex or any form of luxury watch as an investment, because you never know which way the markets and the trends are going to go. I hear people often saying, I'm going to buy a watch, put it in the safe, and I'm going to sell it in 10 years and double my money. That may be the case. It may not. So remember, it's not an investment, it's a wristwatch. And similarly, you should never go into debt to buy a luxury watch. And you know, the sort of clue is in the word there, luxury watch. It's a luxury. Nobody needs a luxury anything. So if you find yourself entering into debt to buy a wristwatch, well, let's be honest, you know, wristwatches kind of falling into misuse as we go forward in time. Check yourself, you know, do not go into debt to buy a luxury watch. So we've set our budget. We've decided, yep, it's a Rolex for me. Now it's time to do some research, because you need to find the watch that you want to buy. It's not just a case of buying a Rolex. There are numerous in the collection, and some are hugely popular, some less so. Some you'll be able to find. Some are merely a myth, like a unicorn. So you need to go and get a brochure from your local authorized dealer. Have a good look at the Rolex website. Have a look at those watches. See what piques your interest. Think about the sizes of them. They very much differ. Some are very large, some are quite modest. This is all going to be exasperated by the fact that for most of the Rolex collection, you won't be able to see an example of it in the flesh before you buy. Because they're so popular, they never get placed in the windows of authorized dealers, of stores, and unless you know somebody who owns one, you probably won't be able to get your hands on one, because they just get sold to collectors who are on waiting lists. They never actually get seen by the public. I mean, it's not uncommon for people to, for the first time somebody sees their watch, to be the day they go and collect it. And that was actually the case when I bought this GMT. I ordered it. I'd never seen one in the flesh until the day I went to collect it. So it's an unusual situation with Rolex. Like I said, it's a customer experience unlike any you'll ever have before, and you might not have in any other area. So worth spending time looking in those brochures, checking out the website. If you know somebody who owns one, get hands-on, see what you like, and then we can set about the hunt. Now, when you do that research, you know, looking at the brochures, looking at YouTube videos with the reviews, you'll soon have your eyes open to the fact that some of the watches are effectively unobtainable via your authorized dealer. Some watches like Daytona models, they are simply so sought after, you're never going to be able to get one from an authorized dealer unless you meet certain criteria, and that's going to take years to get to that level. So unfortunately, not everything is on the table, so you have to be quite realistic. And this is the importance of research. Not only will you see the watches that are available, but you'll come to understand which ones are even possible to buy. So we've decided what watch we want. Now we have to decide where we buy it from. And there are a couple of options. First, most favourable, is the authorised dealer, referred to as the AD. And what is that? Well, quite simply, it's a jewellery store, generally, which has a contract, a licensing agreement with Rolex to sell their products. Rolex do not sell their pieces on the internet or in any other way. They do have some boutiques, which are shops owned by Rolex, which only sell Rolex, but the majority of Rolex outlets that you are likely to encounter will be jewellery stores which have a Rolex concession, which means they'll have other watches available in that store as well, not just Rolex. So the authorised dealer is effectively the gateway into Rolex ownership. And some of those shops, they take that position as if they are the guardians of the galaxy. You know, they definitely do not want to sell watches to people who are going to buy them and sell them straight away for a profit. Because, you know, some pieces, that because they're so sought after and it's difficult to get hold of them, they can be worth 50, 100% more than their retail value. So they definitely don't want people to do that. So you're going to need to enter into a relationship with the authorized dealers, the ADs in your locality. Do that by going into the store, talking to the sales agent, telling them you're interested in a watch, and, you know, making them assured that you are a genuine, authentic person who wants to buy a watch for the pleasure of it. You're not somebody out to make a quick buck by getting their hands on a desirable watch and selling it on quickly for a profit, known as flipping in the industry. Now we've met the AD and we've convinced them that we're a genuine person, we want to buy a watch, but it's not that easy, right? The watches are not going to be on display. They are not going to be readily accessible. You have to go on a wait list, if they even call it that. I've been to 3 authorized dealers in my locality very recently because I'm looking to buy a new watch. And they've all got different ways of allowing you to express an interest. One of them sat down with me and filled an online form in. Another one sat with me and they filled in my details on a spreadsheet on a laptop, as did the other one actually, so they both did something similar. But they all have their own little nuance. They'll all ask you, you know, are you a previous customer? Lots of the questions that they want to know that help them to understand that you're genuine and you're not somebody looking to, you know, devalue the brand by buying and selling on very quickly. So each authorized dealer will be slightly different. That's why it's quite important to build a relationship and get to know those people well. Not to the point where you're annoying them by popping in every day, but certainly build a relationship. It doesn't harm at all. Let's be honest, business is all about human connections. And it sounds strange because, you know, in every other angle of your life as a consumer, you take your money into a shop, you throw it on the table and you say, I want one of those. That doesn't happen with Rolex, right? You go into the store and you have to convince the store that you are somebody worthy of owning that watch. And only then can you pay for it. And even then, the payment process is unusual. There's no negotiation. So don't try and ask for 5% or 10% off. I would say that's only the case with Rolex, mind, because lots of the other brands in that store that you're in, that authorized dealer, Breitling, Omega, IWC, you know, Bell & Ross, whatever it may be, I do recommend you suggest negotiation there because there's quite a high profitability margin on a luxury watch, said to be in excess of 40%. So if the sales agent want to get their sales up, there is always wiggle room. But never embarrass yourself by asking for negotiation on a Rolex. It's not going to happen, all right? Because there are 50 people standing behind you who also want that watch and they will pay full market value. So be grateful. Sounds weird, but be grateful if we can buy this for retail price. Now, I've done a previous video actually, which I will link in the show notes below, in which I bought this Rolex GMT Master 2 from an authorized dealer, and I shopped around, went to a few dealers, had a few different experiences. Worth having a look if you want to see how I went about that process within the last 6 months. Now, aside from the authorized dealer, which is your preference, because, you know, when you buy from an AD, you know you're getting a definitely authentic Rolex watch, you're only going to pay retail price for it, and you've got a point of contact where you can go back to if there's any issues with the watch. Your alternative is pre-owned, or the grey market. And what is that? Well, basically, it's second-hand. Might be brand new, somebody might have bought it and flipped it immediately, but it's going to be classed as second hand because somebody will have owned it before. Now, that's great if you want certain watches, but Rolex, you'll find that there is a premium on the watch if you want anything which is desirable. So we'll take Submariner for an example, you know, the classic iconic Rolex, you know, poster boy of all their watches. Submariner, I don't know what they cost at the moment, but should we say for the sake of argument, they cost £7,000. You know, it wouldn't be uncommon to see that same watch 6 months or 12 months old selling on the grey market pre-owned for £10,000. And this is specifically for people who can't find those watches through the authorised dealer network, or they're just they've got plenty of money and they're impatient. They don't want to cultivate a relationship with the authorized dealer. They want that watch next week. And the only way they can access that is by buying it pre-owned. So the grey market does allow you to buy those desirable watches much faster without any faffing around or, bearing the children of your authorized dealer, taking them out for drinks and this sort of thing. Not that really happens, but you know what I mean. It'll stop you having to do all that, but you have to pay a premium. That's up for you to decide. Now, the places you can do that, there will be bricks and mortar, watch sellers which exist around the country, wherever you live, which sell watches in this way. Increasingly prevalent will be people who buy watches through second-hand watch websites, things like Chrono24, even eBay, really good platforms and relatively safe as well, because they allow, most of them have a watch authentication service where you can make sure your watch is genuine before you pay your money. So worth looking into that if that's the route you want to take. But absolutely, as a preference, the authorized dealer is the number one choice, because we're not going to be paying any more than its market value. And of course, it's a brand new watch, never been owned before, straight onto your wrist. Okay, so let's look at some of the good beginner models that you might want to consider when you're entering into the Rolex world. And we'll also talk about the ones which you will find incredibly difficult to get your hands on. Now, my first Rolex was a Datejust. Datejust 36mm. I'm wearing it today. It's one of my favorite pieces because it's classically elegant. It's been around since 1945 and it's, been updated, but it's one of the cases that I really need you to think carefully when you do your research, because there are so many bloody flies, so many different models available and different iterations. There are numerous different dial designs. This is a sunburst blue, absolutely glorious. There are two different bracelet types, Jubilee and Oyster. There's fluted bezels and smooth bezels. There's 36mm, 41mm dial diameter. There's lots of things to consider. So research time is really important. When it comes to a Datejust, you should be able to find one relatively easily. So if you like a dressy type of watch, which is very robust, 100-meter water resistant, and you don't want to wait around and build a relationship with your AD, this will be a watch you can turn around pretty quickly, even in stainless steel. I understand they're getting a bit short of supply, because this is another weird thing about Rolex. In any other world, gold is more valuable and more desirable than stainless steel. In fact, it's something like 100 times more expensive. But in the Rolex world, the stainless steel watches are king, and the Rolex gold is somewhat pushed to the background. Sounds weird, but it's one of the strange situations when you get into Rolex. So the Datejust, have a look at it. It can look quite sporty, it can be quite robust, it can also be quite dressy, but it's absolutely a watch you can access quite easily. If you like that dressy-ish sort of classic look, the Oyster Perpetual range is perhaps becoming more popular. It's the entry level to Rolex. It's the cheapest watch you can buy in the authorized dealer, but because Rolex brought out some very sort of dynamic colors in, I think it was 2020, these have become exceptionally hard to find. So if you want one of these, although they're the entry level and modest in pricing compared to some of the other models, you might find it difficult to access them, but a great way to enter the Rolex world at the cheapest point at the authorized dealer, if you can find them. The Explorer, if you like the professional range is what Rolex calls their tool watches, their divers, their aviation watches, their GMTs, things like that, their chronographs. The professional range, their entry level into that is the Explorer 1. A very basic, classic, elegant watch, been associated with mountaineering. Apparently it was once considered to be on the expedition to Everest. Whether that's true or not is another matter. But the Explorer 1, it's a lovely watch actually. I'm actually trying to track one down to buy one myself at the moment. Available in a 36mm and previous models in 39mm. So, quite a good stylish piece. If you want a one watch and that's it collection, the Explorer 1 might be something you want to consider. Watches which are hard to get, pretty much all stainless steel iterations of what we've just talked about. But then the Submariner. Rolex's iconic watch, the poster boy of their collection. You know, probably the most numerous watch that they sell, other than Datejust. But the Submariner, really quite hard to get. You'll never see one in a jeweller's window, in an AD. They're not hugely expensive, but everybody wants them. So there's this clamour. You know, can be a substantial waiting list. I own a Submariner. Actually, I bought this one. This is from the last iteration. It's not the current model, but I managed to get one of these within a couple of months. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility. You know, you can get them. You need to get lucky, build a relationship with your AD. So the Submariner is a professional. It can be hard to find, but it's doable. What is very difficult to find is the GMT Master 2 range. This is their GMT watches, which keep track of 2 different time zones. Now, I've got a 2-tone one, which is stainless steel and gold. These are less desirable than the full stainless steel, obviously, because stainless steel is king. But the GMT range, particularly the Batman, which is the blue-black, and the Pepsi, which is the blue-red bezel variations, they're no-no land. You know, you're going to be very, very, very fortunate to find one of those. Quite often, you'll need to buy something lower down the range to convince the authorised dealer that you're a genuine aficionado, and then they will allow you to buy something like a GMT at a later point. But you can get them, you know, and if you want a bit of gold in there, like I love gold, my first preference would be a solid gold model, but I can't afford that, so I went for a 2-tone. If you like a bit of gold, it might make it easier for you to find one of these pieces in either the Submariner or the GMT Master 2. There are other models out there like the Daytona. This is probably the most sought after watch in the entire Rolex range. You won't find one of these. You know, I have very rarely ever seen one of these ever about the place. They must be made in relatively small numbers and all hoovered up by collectors. You just don't see them. So if you enter into this Rolex situation thinking you're going to own a Daytona, I would set aside 10 years for that, to achieve that mission. It's going to be really difficult. But there are some other periphery watches there which you might like. The Milgauss is interesting, stainless steel, but it's got a certain, you know, chic to it in its unusual way. There's also the Explorer 2. It's quite large. If you like the dive watches, you've got the deep sea watches like that, which are big, chunky, professional diving watches. Explore that brochure. See what you like the look of. The Yachtmaster can be an alternative to the Submariner and a little easier to get your hands on. So find out what's out there, do your research, and then you'll have a better chance of reducing the watch that you want onto your wrist. And finally, remember to enjoy your watch and do so safely, all right? When you've finally got that watch of your dreams, don't lock it in the safe and be afraid to wear it. The beauty of Rolex, it is tough, it is rough, it is robust. It'll go through life without any problems. You know, the dive watch, the Submariner, it'll go to 300-meter water resistant. You should never be afraid to jump into the swimming pool or the sea with this watch. Same goes for most of them, they're all water resistant. Even the GMT, 100-meter water resistant, same goes for the Datejust. You don't have to baby these pieces. You'd never have to leave them in the safe when you go on holidays because you can't wear it to the pool. You can wear them all in the pool, it's not going to bother them at all. These are really tough pieces, so don't worry about it. But worry about other people, right? Because safety is a key here. Everybody else knows how much a Rolex costs as well. So people, particularly in big cities, London, New York, places like that, they will spot that Rolex, and those who have got criminal intentions might want to part you from that watch because they know they can turn that watch into money with no trouble at all. So be minded. You know, if you're going to be walking around tourist areas in big cities like London, perhaps keep the Rolex in your pocket until you go back to safe areas and slip it back on again. But enjoy your watch safely. Now, one of the negative things about buying your first Rolex is it's likely to mean you get bitten by the bug. And I went out and I wanted to buy one watch with the intention of it being a one-off. I'm 3 Rolexes in at the moment and looking for my next one, and I don't know where it's going to stop. It can become a little bit addictive. They are beautiful, enjoyable, and definitely habit forming. So that is a downside about getting into the Rolex world. But I'm sure if you get a Rolex on your wrist, you will enjoy it as much as I have. Now I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I'm going to leave some links to some related videos that I've done in the past down below. Might help you on your journey. If you have enjoyed this video, do us a favour, thumbs up, click the red button and subscribe if you haven't been here before, and go on the Chap's Guide journey along with me and everybody else here at the community. Until the next time, take care of yourselves, enjoy your timepieces in good health, and I will see you again very soon.